Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. Kaihan Krippendorf is a thinker and a doer. A former McKinsey consultant turned strategist, he's the founder of OutThinker Networks, a global think tank of corporate strategists, innovators and entrepreneurs shaping the future of business. Kaihan's work has generated over $3 billion in new annual revenue for clients, including some of the world's most recognizable companies like JP Morgan Chase, L'Oreal, Microsoft, Raytheon and Yahoo. He's the author of 6 best-selling strategy and innovation books, including Outthink the Competition, where he outlines the 5 habits of breakthrough strategic thinkers. His latest book, Proximity, co-authored with Professor Rob Wolcott, offers a bold new idea. In today's world, it's not the biggest company that wins, but the one that gets closest to the customer, to the moment, and to what truly matters. Recognized by Thinkers 50 and global gurus as a world-leading management thinker specializing in innovation and strategy, Kaihan is also a sought-after keynote speaker and advisor to business leaders and CXOs from some of the world's most admired companies. Kaihan, welcome to the podcast.
Brad, it is so great to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That's my pleasure. First of all, I think that you and we've known each other for 10 or 12 years
More
or
than that. I mean, when I was with you in Perth, and I already knew you before that, my eldest son was not yet born, or maybe he had just been born. He's 18 now, so I think it's got to be at least 15 years.
And I immediately think about, if it's the same one, building the
Legos.
Blocks.
Yep, the Lego blocks. Yes, that's him.
Now
he's building. He's here for home for the summer. He bought a 3D printer, and he is designing a robotic arm with a very sophisticated ball-bearing mechanism. So that's what he's graduated to as of now.
Still in the same theme though. Oh, that's fantastic. So you've spent a career in strategy, but first of all, you supported both of my books, Made to Thrive and Onboarded. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's great after, I think, 50 something episodes to have you here. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, but let's start with strategy. For many people, you're a go-to on strategy. You, as described in the bio, started off as a McKinsey consultant and then really saw an opportunity, I think, around continuing to pursue strategy. And as I best understand it, then started studying the art of war and the stratagems. So tell us perhaps a little bit to start with about that journey, what got you interested in strategy, although you were already, and then just how that's kind of evolved into your first book and then subsequently from there.
So in the 1980s, I would say the Western world in general, in the United States and Europe, and I assume also in Australia, there was this fascination with Japanese, philosophy, right? So my father, who's a professor at the same university for 58 years. He goes to Japan for not a sabbatical, but a conference. He comes back and he brings these books, Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, The Art of Archery. Anyway, I got into Zen. And so I sort of planted a seed. I did martial arts. And so I found this translation before I went to business school of this book. I'd never heard of it before, called The 36 Stratagems, a Chinese book. And anyway, I had nothing to do for a summer. I had no friends where I was staying. I was living in the Dominican Republic, learning Spanish. I just left my wife, and I was looking to learn Spanish. And I didn't know any. So on the weekends, I would just go to the office and I would read this book. And the internet was just coming to be at that point. I could get the internet not at home, but I could get it at the office. And I would go online. I'd research these cases and just start cataloging them. And I think that was the seed. They say, maybe your experience is similar. You get to write one book the first book, when you have all the time in the world and no one's waiting for you to deliver it. And that was my first book. All my other books since then, I've been very passionate about them, but there's been time pressure there. So all of my work, I think, emanates from that summer where I spent months and months and months cataloging business concepts and tagging them to this set of 36 strategic stratagems or strategic patterns.
And that really, I mean, I've seen you speak as recently as the last 6 months or year to an audience that still permeates a lot of your work and thinking today.
Yeah, it is, because I think it's not a thing. I think it's an idea. Let's say the central thesis here is that every strategic concept that you might study, and I do think, and what I love about your work is that you diverge from this, but I do think there's a lot of repetition, right? There's a lot of, hey, someone creates aspirin, and then I'm going to sell you aspirin, but I'm going to call it something else. And someone else is going to sell it something else. But there's certain core strategic concepts that we're not inventing strategic concepts, we're repurposing them. So I think that there's, jobs to be done, preferential access to resources, economy of scope, economy of scale, first mover advantage, second mover advantage. These are all strategic concepts. And I think that the 36 stratagems is a great catalog of every strategic concept. And I would even argue that we haven't come up with any new strategic concepts in the 60 years that we've been studying business strategy. This text is 2,000 years old. And so it is the promise here is not this is one idea. It is that this is a catalog of all strategic ideas. So this becomes sort of evergreen.
So for the listeners, perhaps you can give an example of a stratagem and then how that translates into being used by a corporation or a company that they may have heard of.
Yeah, sure. So, one that I don't talk much about, but I think is really great is called beat the grass to startle a snake. And the idea here is that you're walking and you see some grass and you're worried that there's a snake in there. If you step into the grass, there might be a snake there and it might bite you. If you walk all the way around, you might have wasted your time. So the advice is instead beat the grass. And if you beat the grass and there's a snake there, then you know to go around. And if there isn't one, then you can save time and go through, right? So the core principle there is to take action, not in order to achieve that which the action could achieve, but rather to gain information that then informs your next action. So now what that is agile. That is experimentation. That is the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act, right? There's a whole body of work from John Boyd and the OODA loop to Steve Blank to, all of that is based on this idea that we take action in order to learn. So that's one. Right. Another one, just to show that there are differences. Another one is seize the opportunity to lead the sheep away, which says there's a shepherd walking down the road. He wants to steal a sheep. He can't steal the sheep because a shepherd is observing him. So he continues to walk on. But then he notices this moment where the shepherd has walked up a hill and turned his back. And if the shepherd were to take a sheep, if the peasant were to take a sheep, he does the mental sort of calculus, and he says, first, the shepherd won't see me. If the shepherd turns his back and sees me, he's going to be on the horns of a dilemma, because by the time he gets down to the bottom of the hill to stop me, he will have to choose between saving the one sheep that I'm walking away from or protecting my whole flock. That dilemma is the innovator's dilemma. The core innovation. So here we have two big strategic concepts, and there are people who believe that these strategic concepts are a religion. I'm a Steve Blank guy. I'm a Clayton Christensen guy, right? And what I think is cool about this catalog is it says, yes, you could be one or both. You don't have to choose. These are just starting points of ways of thinking that help you see options that might reveal options that without that pattern you might not see.
And so that's in terms of thinkers. What about a company? So think about Amazon or Netflix or Apple, some of the more famous companies. How might some of the more famous things that they've done translate to a stratagem by way of example?
we tend to do things at work, right? You do something, I don't know, you were a little kid and you said something and your mother gave you milk or whatever, and you repeat that. We all do that. We can only remember a few things. So we have these kind of patterns. Organizations have patterns as well. And so I did this one workshop many years. I can talk about the work that I did a long time ago, less of the more recent stuff, but I did a workshop for a few hundred people at Microsoft. And what we looked at was, what is the Microsoft playbook? What's the Apple playbook, and what's the Google playbook? And now let's attack different opportunities, maps or search or whatever with these. And how would you use this in playbook? And one thing that you notice, and it seems counterintuitive, Microsoft has a strong leaning towards being first, to being at the cutting edge. It invests heavily in like very fundamental research technology. Apple is usually second. Right? It waits until someone invents the MP3 player. Someone else invents some video streaming. Someone else invents the digitization of music. And they say, let me now wait until everything is there. Let me pull it together and let me do it better. Right? So these are two opposite patterns. One is to get there first and one is to get there second. If you want to, in business terms, there's first mover advantage. There's fast follower strategy. Right? So I think you could take any company and you can look at, just like you and I, we do something, it's successful, repeat it. Companies start repeating what they've done before, and that becomes a playbook.
Yeah. All strategic moves have been mapped or at least outlined in the past. It makes me think about Go, the game, the Asian game that was beaten by AI maybe 8 years ago, something like that. I'm curious on your take if AI might be able to come up with another strategic play that no one has thought of. Now, it's speculation, I appreciate that, but any reflection from that?
No, I think I couldn't know if there are only 36. There might be a 37. All I'm saying is, look, this thing was written sometime between 500 BC and 500 AD. 1,000 years of oral tradition, stories told, synthesized. You tell me a story, I like the story, I tell it again. It's sort of like a research project, a 1,000-year research project. We've only been studying strategy for like 50 years. Do you know the whole idea of competitive advantage did not exist before 1980?
Yes.
At the time of this recording, where it's 2025, 45 years ago, nobody before Michael Porter introduced this term competitive. Nobody talked about competitive advantage, right? We're just so nascent. We're like little babies. 45 years of studying competitive advantage, right? And so, hey, totally, tomorrow, today, you and I right here, maybe we come up with the 37th. But if I was going to put my money on something, I would bet it on 1,000 years versus 45 years.
I agree. I suppose the question is really intended, and my line of thinking is really intended to ask, how do you think AI is impacting strategy, strategic thinking now? And we can only really speak about the near future and the near future.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, first of all, two quick thoughts. One is, I do believe, AI is just going to be smarter than us, right? It's going to be more. One of the guy I had, one person I had on my podcast, I'm just forgetting his name at the moment. However, he said, think of it as this. We are giving birth to a child. This child will grow up to be smarter than us. As a parent, how do you want that child to treat you in the future? You want it to be caring and take care of you. AI will take care of us. It'll have more information on us. It'll be able to process more information. So I totally would think that AI will come up with strategies that we don't conceive of. But for me, I think what I'm researching right now that I think is really an interesting use case for AI is, let's say the fundamental purpose of a company is to find needs and match them with solutions. Product market fit. Product market fit is, I got a customer need, I got a solution, and when they come together and we can do it and we're getting a lot of people interested, that becomes product. That is the beginning of every great company, right? Companies are enormously inefficient at taking needs. You're talking to your customers, your salespeople are talking to your customers, your operational and product people are doing their thing, and they don't talk to each other, right? Enormously inefficient. So I think AI can help. There's 5 steps. One is discovering needs and discovering solutions. AI can help us with that. They can scrape your CRM and look for patterns. They can track whatever the solutions are. Second, matching. They can match needs to solutions better. The third is valuation. They can do that. They can look at the resulting idea. They can ask, what's the TAM? What's the total addressable market? What's the propensity to pay? What's the profitability? What are the comparables? All that stuff. They can then prioritize those. Hey, this is worth more than that. The customer lifetime value of that versus the customer lifetime value of that is this and that. And then they can help us take action on those. Like, there are great tools that can help you create you could type in a description of an idea, and this one tool that I really love, Gamma, it'll create a PowerPoint deck that just creates the pitch deck for you, right? So AI can help with all of those 5 steps, from discovery to matching to valuation to prioritization to activation. And so I think then with that, we can just really, if that's what strategy is, which is one view of strategy, AI will dramatically accelerate our ability to strategize and create value.
I was talking with my son last night. He leads a team of software engineers and a team who works on an LLM, running and building an LLM, large language model, an AI for a large corporation who aren't a technology corporation. And we were discussing the point of where we're at now, and we're talking in late May 2025 for context. We agreed and traded opinions, but we generally agreed. A couple of years ago, it was like talking to a 10-year-old. Maybe a year ago, it was like talking to someone who's 21, maybe 6 months ago, a university graduate. Now, and then in the last 3 months, it moved to being a university professor. And now we kind of agreed it's like talking to a university of professors. So things are changing pretty quick. So
yeah, we did research recently, and we have this community of 100 chief strategy officers. And we interviewed about 25 of them, but then we want to interview all of them. And we used a platform called Complex Chaos. And it's pretty cool. Like it creates this bot, trains it on these questions. And you could at any time just like click the button and say, yeah, I'm ready for my interview. I'm between meetings, or someone canceled a meeting. I've got 7 minutes. You just get on the phone and just interact with this bot. And many of our members said that it just felt like talking to a person, a smart interviewer, and it solicits the information and consolidates it. There's a lot of areas where what AI can generate for us in terms of images or video or dialogue is indistinguishable from reality.
I'm interested, have you got any perspective, given this rate of change, about how do you select and execute a strategy in the midst of a world that's effectively moving faster?
Yep.
I cross my fingers and hope that you're going to give us some kind of gem of wisdom. I don't know if it's possible though, because today's strategy could be completely wiped out, the one that you develop, in 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, a few thoughts here. If we look at the adoption of technologies, it tends to find these 5 phases. The first is the technology initially makes some things easier. There's the first order changes. Some things easier, and other things they maybe don't make more difficult, but relatively speaking, they're not make them easier, right? That's step 1. Step 2 is that there are second order consequences. So the consequence of making like the microwave is introduced. It allows us to cook food easier, but it allows us to cook individual small amounts of food, not big amounts of food, right? Second order consequence. Hey, I can heat up Brad's food and Jane's food and Kaihan's food, but it takes a long time to cook a meal for my family of 5. That didn't help me. So what happens? The second order consequence is that we start eating smaller meals, individual meals. Then comes the social adaptation to the new balance of what's easier, more difficult, which is we don't have to eat at home alone. At home at a family. Family meals go disappear. So what does that mean? That means I can come home late. You could come home early. What does that mean? It reduces the time it takes to prepare food and wash clothes and things like. So what does that mean? At the time of the microwave being introduced and related technologies, women primarily did the housework in most cultures, at least in the United States. The amount of time it takes to maintain a house goes from 40 hours to 15 hours. What does that mean? Now women can do other things with their time, and that leads to a change in expectations, in laws, in social norms about women working, right? And now where are we today? Stage 5 is we forget the technology was even there. Of course women work. My wife she's like a rock star executive that runs a huge organization, and of course she works. But before the microwave, maybe not, So I think that where we are on AI, I think, is in phase 1. The first order consequences. Can I get this email out a little bit faster? Can I take this information and create one document out of it? We're not even thinking about the second order consequences, let alone what the social changes and reconfigurations will be after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does that mean? You need more optionality in your strategy. That's it. Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. You need a lot more Horizon 3 optionality, so that when things pivot, as they will, because we cannot predict, it is about adaptability, about flexibility, about optionality, not about predictability and committed execution. We just need more optionality in our strategies.
In your experience, how many companies, or what percentage of companies do you think have an effective strategy, and why is strategy so important?
It's interesting. I think the question of why is strategy important, it's a circular thing, because strategies that people don't believe and don't align with are not effective strategies. They're just words, right?
Yeah.
I've used this term so long. I probably used it like that 15 years ago when I was with you at Perth. Yeah. Vision without action is a daydream, but action without vision is a nightmare. This whole idea of strategy eats execution for lunch, or what's more important, I think that is like, it's a useless chicken and egg question.
Yeah.
You need both, right? So strategies that people believe are more valuable than strategies they won't believe. If you can find the right strategy, then that's obviously even better. But I think a good strategy, if I have to choose, would be one that aligns people around a set of behaviors. 10 years ago, I would have said a set of choices. But in an era of uncertainty, it's about decisions that we will make, how we will react to the uncertainty, as opposed to coming up with a plan, executing a plan. Another way to think of it is when you're learning a new game, you're learning a new sport, let's say, right? You've got to start training yourself in the intuitive behaviors that work for that new sport. And so I think we're in a learning phase where we're adopting new playbooks, new patterns, new approaches, as opposed to knowing I've played this game before and this is what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in my experience, I think that a lot of companies can confuse what strategy is, or at least mid-market companies is my arena perhaps, and can think that strategy is setting a goal a few years out or setting a new geography or something like that, whereas it's very specifically something that you will do that will create value.
Yeah, I think the goal maybe is like part of the strategy, the beginning of the strategy, but to your point, it's like, it's in my OutThinkers podcast, and we're at like 150 episodes, I ask every guest, and many of them are experts in strategy. I ask them, what is your definition of strategy? I have never, ever gotten the same definition. If I do, it's because someone said, I agree with this other person, and they're just quoting that person. But if anyone tells you this is what strategy is, I would question whether they actually have thought about it.
It would be irresponsible of me to not, in response, ask you, what is your definition of strategy?
I think, it's, what's it called? Satisficing, as opposed to, satisficing is a word. This is a good enough definition, is a goal and rules that determine what choices we should make to achieve the goal. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, it's nice and succinct and it makes sense. So if you can, give us a quick overview of a couple of your books, Outthink the Competition and Proximity.
Sure. Yeah. So Outthink the Competition is where I took those 36 stratagems and said the 36 stratagems are patterns that help us come up with ideas. If we can just come up with ideas, but if we are coming up with ideas for the wrong problem, or we don't do anything with those ideas, that's useless.
Yes.
So in Outthink the Competition, what I say is before you come up with the idea, what we have to do is first imagine, which is come up with a goal. Then we have to dissect, which is break down the problem, decide, for a mid-market company this year, should we be focusing on product? Should we be focusing on people and recruitment and onboarding? Should we focus on branding? Should we focus on channels, right? And then comes the expand, the ideation. And then comes analyzing or choosing which of those to prioritize. And then sell is about aligning the organization, IDEAS. So I think those are the 5 steps or types of conversations that we need to have to be able to have a good strategy. That's what Outthinking the Competition is about.
And proximity?
So proximity is in that middle phase of the, and maybe it's more in the beginning phase as I think about it, is what is the future? Because in Imagine, what we envision what the future is, like Elon Musk in his SpaceX business is designed for a future in which humans are interplanetary species. What is the vision? I propose that every industry is going to move to a state, let's say move toward a state, where value gets produced and delivered at the point of demand. So I'll give you just 2 quick examples of that are related. The first is there is a soda machine that Coca-Cola developed that allows you to press a bunch of buttons. And if you want a caffeine-free diet, vanilla, cherry, Sprite, you can hit those buttons and you can get exactly what you want. Why can they do that with a machine, but they can't do it with a bottle? Is because they create less of the value before you press the buttons. They combine the syrup with the soda after you've pressed the buttons. So a lot of the value gets created right there. You're standing in front of the machine. Right then, you've just hit the last button and hit dispense. That same technology is used for a machine that's funded by the government or the US government that allows you to take basic materials and combine them using the same technology of this microfluid technology to create 15 different generic drugs. So imagine a small town in the middle. I guess are there small towns in the middle of Australia? I don't know, but somewhere in Australia where there's no.
There might be 1 or 2.
There might be 1 or 2 where, we can't get. We have drug shortages. There's only a few people, and if my son gets sick and needs this medicine, I can't get it. This machine can now only combine the ingredients and then create 15 of these particular pills that your son needs at that moment. Those raw ingredients have a shelf life of forever. Lasts forever, right? And the amount of inventory you have to keep is much lower. So anywhere, food is getting grown closer and closer to where it's needed. 3D printing allows you to print car parts only when they're needed. ChatGPT, you're basically creating content instead of listening to a podcast that was recorded months ago. It is creating for you the content of that podcast based off of your inquiries right there, right then. So take any industry and ask, what does P equals 0 look like? And that's the idea of proximity.
P equals 0, proximity is the closest possible to the point of demand, yeah?
Yep. It really should be P equals infinite, but it's P equals 0.
Yeah, I understand. And so this is a trend that you're observing. It's a shift, and there are more examples and perhaps more opportunities. I guess if you're Coca-Cola, you have the resources to trial and pursue and innovate in these areas. How might this affect mid-sized firms, do you think?
Yeah.
This proximity change?
Yeah, I mean, Uber, introduced this whole new model just by getting the car to the curb, 30 seconds before. I remember many years ago, Vern Harnish, who we both know, talking about a company that was a lawn servicing company. And what this guy invented was a way for you to go online and say and create an estimate of what it would cost for you to service the lawn. And what he did was he took a Google satellite image. This is like 15, 20 years ago. A satellite image.
Yeah.
Right. right? And he could then estimate and give you a reasonably accurate estimate. And because that estimate got to you in 30 seconds, because it got you 30 seconds, where the competition might take a day to come and visit you, it gave you a huge competitive advantage, right? I interviewed, how edited is this?
Not at all.
Not at all. Great. Okay, good. I'm forgetting the name in just Red Balloon, the woman who founded Naomi Simpson. Interviewed her. And what she is able to do is connect you with experiences.
Yeah.
And discover and book and secure those experiences faster than calling up people, what ideas you have, and so it is just about, it only takes seconds. If you can just get seconds ahead of your competition, it can create a huge competitive advantage. So in the customer finding journey, the customer buying journey, and then the product delivery journey, break through that and look for where are there little steps where I can save seconds, and it will give you a huge advantage.
And so for mid-market leaders, they've got to think about, is there any way that we can bring that value closer? And it might not be in obvious ways. It could be in ways that they're not necessarily seeing. Is there a blind spot that you see when it comes to proximity? And how can you correct that before a competitor does, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that the big blind spot is thinking that your product is delivered through physical attributes and underappreciating the digital services around the product that also create value. When you're selling a pizza, people are buying the pizza, yes, but they're also buying information about that the pizza is being made, the ability to personalize it, where is it on the map. And so really thinking about the full flower of the product. There's a core product in the middle, and then there are these petals that are, how do I order? How do I pay? How do I get information? How do I get pricing information? How do I deal with exceptions and all of those? And thinking broadly about the whole value proposition. 50% of what a person pays for now when they buy a new car is digitally delivered. 30 years ago, it was 100% physically delivered. And that is why proximity is so powerful now, is because much more of the value proposition that you deliver is digital. And so thinking holistically about all of the different areas of value that you're delivering, even the digital ones, and looking across those and saying, which could we have a little leap on? And so I think that's a big blind spot, is thinking that your core product is just the core product. It's not all of the ancillary, augmenting and facilitating services that are around your product.
I'm interested in your connection or the way you think about proximity and outthink the competition. In particular, you talk about the 5 habits of strategic thinkers in Outthink the Competition. How do they evolve or become more powerful in a proximity-driven world?
That's awesome. So I think that one way to think of it is proximity is one pattern of the 36 patterns that plugs into expand. You take the proximity lens on, and now you get a bunch of ideas, which then you analyze and then you sell. IDEAS. So it's the E of that. Do you know what I mean? I also think, however, that proximity is accelerating the entire cycle. And so whereas it used to be, you could introduce a new strategy, ramp it up, 10 years later, think about what the next strategy is. That 10-year future is getting to a 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. More rapidly. And so it requires us, therefore, to be building new S-curves more rapidly. And I also think this is a big idea that I think I'm just sort of getting my head around, is 70% of what your company does right now is operate to deliver the core product, the core operations, right? As AI allows us to automate a lot of that 70% could go down to 30%. So now you can spend 70% of your time trying new things, starting and finishing new projects.
Yep.
So we could be trying where, instead of trying a new pricing strategy, let's go from selling widgets to selling membership. Let's go from, let's create a recurring revenue model. Instead of that being like a 5-year project, that could be a 1-year project, we could try 5 different pricing strategies in the next year. So we're able to experiment and try new things. And because our relationship with customers is more digital, we're getting more direct feedback from our customers more rapidly. We're able to see what's working, run these experiments, and we're going to see an acceleration in the evolution of strategy. What you sell, how you deliver it, how you price it, how you brand it, how you operationalize it, what partners you use, how you recruit, how you organize, how you incentivize, all of that, all of those dimensions we can now just be experimenting more rapidly on.
For the podcast, we were talking about employees, and we both said, "Oh, I wish we'd spoken about this when we were on record." But what you said then really made me think about the way that employees have changed up until now and how they might change into the future in terms of, I guess, being a competitive advantage broadly in the way that you, I'll say, treat them inappropriately or in the wrong fashion, but the way that you treat them, the way that you build your culture and so forth. So what's your current thinking around employees?
So I think if we look at how companies have sought to create competitive advantage over the history of capitalism, which is pretty young, is what we cared about was cycles. Predicting when economic cycles were going to increase or decrease so we could like build new factories or shut down factories. 1950s, we kind of switched to resources. Who controls the diamond mines? Who controls the oil fields? As I said before, 1980s, it becomes about competition. And I think that's still an echo here is like competition, beating the competition, having competitive advantage. Yeah. I think in the 2000s with the incredible success of Amazon saying, we don't care about the competition. We care about the customer. It's been very customer centric. So we got customer centric design. We've got, all the customer centricity stuff. Yeah. I sense that we're now moving into another phase where your employee is the new customer. And if you think about what you sell your customer right now, and this is what I love about your work, is that you have been focused on the customer side, in the value stick, willingness to pay, willingness to sell, creating a value proposition for your employees it's like, I think Rita McGrath, I think put it this way it's like we have a hotel company, and for the front end, we have like 7 different brands. We got the high end brand, we got the cool brand, the young brand, the old brand. For the employees, what do we have? We have one hotel, one brand, one size room, one size bed, and all we're doing is selling you a commodity. I mean, you should have a different employee product for a young family, someone who doesn't have kids yet and just wants to work their butt off. You should have a different one for a grandparent. You should have a different one for someone who wants to live like abroad for half the year. We should be segmenting and differentiating our product. That product being employment, or we should call it something else, for our customers. I mean, for our
employees. I certainly think that that's the way that employees, or perhaps more specifically younger employees, viewing this world, this perspective at the moment, that they're looking at their employment experience in the same way they would look at a purchasing experience journey.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that so there's like 3 factors I would say. One is, do we have more jobs than employees, right? And that swings back and forth, right? During COVID, we really needed employees, and it swings back and forth. But I think there's 2 other factors. One is the growth of gig working and multi portfolio careers. So that gives us the opportunity to, if we're willing to hire incremental employees and employees to be able to choose, more often. And the other thing is, just like nowadays, if I don't like a product, I can put it online and say, this product was, crap. And people will stop buying the product. We see the same dynamic with employees. This employer is just not a good employer. And that's going to hurt people. So I think that like one of them swings back and forth, but 2 of them, I think there's a clear trend towards creating more value in segmenting and giving employees.
Well, it's about recognizing the value that employees can contribute to the broader strategy. And I'll say very specifically, a strong culture. What's the connection between that and gross profit margin %?
Totally.
Like, can you draw that line? And if you can, that's when you can think, oh, then I can deliver a better
Yeah.
value to the customer. I can
I,
command a better price.
I can prove to you that if you ask your employees, do you consider yourself an employee or an entrepreneur? If they say, I consider myself an entrepreneur, implications being I have determination, I can pursue opportunities, I can be creative, I can rally the resources to pursue these, I can be an entrepreneur from inside. If they say they're entrepreneurs, you have a 6 times advantage in your ability to recruit and retain top talent. You have a 3 times advantage in your overall financial performance over a 3-year period. Huge payoff of doing that.
Yeah, that's very impressive. You've done a lot of work on entrepreneurs. How does that apply in a mid-market company? What is your take on that?
I mean, you talk a lot about ownership mindset, right? Giving
Yeah.
people a sense of having ownership and feeling a sense of having freedom to pursue opportunities, understand who the customer is, taking an outside-in perspective, and not having kind of greater flexibility in their jobs. I think OKRs are a great way to kind of adjust jobs more rapidly. There are a lot of techniques that are allowing us to be more. But I think that what you want to do is you want to give people. I'll be honest with you. I think like I don't know what the number is, but let's say 50% of people want to come up and just tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's totally legitimate. Totally legitimate. 50% of people want to have self-determination. And so there's huge payoff in allowing that. So you can produce incentive structures. You can create a greater portion of your salary, tie that to performance or outcomes. If you can give people the chance to set their own outcomes, because you can't have accountability without choice. Give them the choice in choosing outcomes, and then tie income to them, allow them the flexibility to team up with other people, give them 15, 20, 25% of their time to be able to try new things, give them a 5-5-5, give 5 people $5,000, 5 weeks to run an experiment, all these things that you can do to create more entrepreneurialism or opportunities in the company.
But it makes a difference, as you said. So what do you think that a better business looks like for you and most of the people that you deal with? Now, the context is the book that I'm working on at the moment is entitled Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better. And so it's essentially about, rather than setting goals that are vacuous or vanity goals, come back to work on building a better business. And so for you, what does a better business look like?
Yeah, I'm sort of like reprogramming myself, honestly, right now, as I'm growing my practice and my business. David Wharton, who I know you know and know his work, he studies companies that have lasted 100 or 300 years. If you want to build a company that really lasts, it makes sense to me, and his research shows, is you want to have incremental paced growth and not grow for growth's sake. Grow to sustain. And I think that a big part of the reason for that is that your capacity to deliver on new growth, a new product or a new channel or a new geography, it is limited by your human capability. What is your ability to recruit and to onboard and to scale up new employees, which is why your second book is so important. But you don't want to sell to customers that you aren't going to be able to deliver on because you don't have the human capability to deliver on them. That will eventually fall in on itself. So if you want to take a long-term perspective, I think that paced growth, that is understanding that you may grow customers faster than you grow employees, and choosing to grow at the right pace, the slower of the two, that's the path to longevity.
Brilliant. Thank you. What is a book that you would recommend for our audience?
My gosh, so many books. I will say a book that so many books. I do like several podcasts a month. For strategy, my favorite book is Competition Demystified by Bruce Greenwald. I think it distills strategy nicely, and because it comes from an investor's perspective, it's very kind of just straightforward, nuts and bolts. So I think that is a very good one. I will say, and this is maybe less so for an international audience as opposed to a US audience, I would say my favorite business book is called Americana, 400 Years of American history described in capitalism. That's something like that is the title, Bu Srinivasan. And what he describes is the history of the United States, not explained from politics or religion, but rather from capitalism. And I think that's a brilliant.
Okay, very nice. Competition Demystified and Americana. We'll put those in the show notes. Thank you.
Great.
And we'll put your books in the show notes as well.
Appreciate
How
it.
can people learn more about you and your business?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best way, is to connect with me on LinkedIn. And then from there, you can find my 2 other websites, but LinkedIn is the best way.
Okay, we'll put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
Appreciate it.
What haven't we discussed that you wanted to cover off today?
Oh my God, there's so much to discuss. So much to discuss. But that's why, this is one of many podcasts that you produce and that people should listen to. And it's endless.
What's your podcast called, Kaihan?
I've got 3 podcasts, but the main one is OutThinkers. I think that'll be the one to listen to. OutThinkers.
Point 2. Yeah. And it's
well, for mid-market companies, we've launched a new podcast called Strategy at Scale, which I'm producing with Vern Harnish from Scaling Up, and also the Growth Institute. So that's another podcast that we've launched about 3 months ago.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Kaihan. Our conversations are always engaging, and I love them, and especially today. So thank you so much for your time today and sharing your wisdom with our audience.
I loved it. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it, Brad.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.